All right, so let's continue with Benjamin Seroussi. He is now coming into the Symposium from Sao Paulo, from Brazil, so like from a totally different time zone. So super nice and generous of you to take the time, and thank you for your interest in our speculative, fabulative knowledge production on institutional futures. So within the last 2 days we were listening to very nice ideas and got insights into the practices of the invited contributors. To shortly introduce you, Benjamin is a curator, editor, and cultural manager. He works as artistic director of Casa do Povo, a political and cultural institution in the neighborhood of Bom Retiro in Sao Paulo, aimed at enforcing and channeling the power of the public. Seroussi, he has a background in sociology, and among other projects, he was associate curator of the 31st Biennial in Sao Paulo. I visited Casa do Povo 2023, and you nicely gave me a tour through the house, and I got a very nice impression of your work, and also follow the work of Grupo Mesha and how much their work is integrated in the house, and we are very happy to listen to your contribution now about Casa do Povo. Thank you, Benjamin.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Anyone in the room?
Yes.
I just see like small heads and someone hiding behind a ventilator. Yeah. So, well, I don't know. I'm going to try and make it interesting because we all suffer from digital fatigue. So I hope I can catch your attention. And thank you for having me here, Victoria. I'm very happy. I wish I was in person because I would love to hear more about what you guys are discussing in this couple of days. And because according to what I read, it's very connected to what we do here. So in Brazil. I'm sorry for my terrible French accent. I was born in France. So anyway, that's why my English is like so much Frenchy. But I'll try to walk you through the place I've been working at in the past 15 years, which is Casa do Povo. And for me, it's very exciting to be able to do that because it's also, I'm stepping down of artistic direction this year. So it's also very interesting to be able and look back at what I've been trying to do here, which connects a lot with what you discussed. I'm going to try and use at the same time as my notes, and I have some images instead of just talking head. Let me see if that's going to work. We know it's going to work, but let me see just if I can separate my notes from the image so I can check them at the same time. Yeah, so there is the images. Tell me if you can see them properly. I'm gonna share it like this. Is that okay? It's a bit ridiculous to have me on the image, right? But does it make any sense?
It's nice. It's funny.
Okay. Okay. So let me see if I can make it bigger. Okay. So you can see the images, right?
Yes.
Is it big enough?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what I told Victoria is that I'm going to try and talk, let's say, something like 20 minutes maybe, not much more than that, but because I'd like to hear from you. Otherwise, it's going to be very dull, I guess. So if you feel like you're losing attention or whatever, just say something, okay? So basically, this is Casa do Povo. Casa do Povo in Portuguese means the people's house, right? So that's the house. It's a quite big building in downtown São Paulo. I don't know if, besides Vitória, if any one of you is familiar with São Paulo, with Brazil. Maybe. Some of you? No? Anyone? Not really.
Some, and some not.
Okay. So this is in downtown São Paulo. It's close to the Pinacoteca, which is quite a big museum we have here in São Paulo, which is run by Jochen Volz. And so we're like really close by. And it's a quite interesting neighborhood because it's an immigrant neighborhood. And I'm gonna get into that. But so basically, before getting into the subject matter, I mean, what I would like to tell you is that when I started to work at Casa do Povo in 2013, 2012, I guess like most of you, at least with people organizing the symposium, I felt something was wrong in the sense that the model of cultural center and museums, which is very recent, if we think about modern art museum, they were invented only in 1929 in Woods or in New York, so it's less than 100 years. But I felt that they had become like a natural formula to solve anything, any problems we have regarding the arts. And even if the art didn't fit in them, art had somehow to be able to fit in that kind of construct. And even though we had an amazing renewal of what is an art museum in the 60s and 70s, my understanding, and I guess we all have the same feelings, that in the past like 20, 30 years, museums started to grow so much that they somehow became more palace for consumption than places for critical thinking or discussions in general. That the idea of museum as a forum or as a laboratory was somehow dropped on the way, and museums became more about creative industries, tourism. So there was a feeling that we needed like to bring back art in connection to other spheres of life within what is called an art space or a museum or a cultural center. And for me, that's one big thing, which is at the origin of what I've been doing in Casa do Povo. And the other one is also somehow believing that I would say that people know what they want and also want what they don't know. That's a sentence from our Minister of Culture, Gilberto Gil, like some 20 years ago. But it's a way to say that we professionals who work as curators or manager within art spaces, we often think that people don't come in because they just don't know what's going on. But often they know they're just not interested in coming in. I think the very access to want like people somehow people are looking for. We should like trust them more and be able to listen more to, let's say, how to connect art to other needs in general. So this is a bit like where I started in Casa do Povo, which is this big building that was almost shutting down when I came in 2012. And I would just like to bring in like two references that from and as Victoria says, I come from anthropology and sociology, and for me it was very important when I started to work 20 years ago. I was using a lot an author called Howard Becker, which maybe you're familiar with, which is a very important reference in sociology of the arts and of culture. And Howard Becker was very interesting for me because he really questions how we build art spaces through what he calls long chains of solidarity. So, which is a way to kind of avoid to separate art from other spheres of light, and also to avoid to separate our work as curators from the work of other professionals. So he talks about this long chain of solidarity. And for me, if we want to change art spaces, we need to look at this long chain of solidarity between workers, between fundings, between curators, between artists. That's something very strong that comes from Howard Becker, which was a very important reference for me. Another reference which became very much mainstream in the past 20 years, which is all the work of developed in anthropology by people like Bruno Latour or other connected authors from France in the 90s and 2000, What was very interesting for me is that these people were looking also at this change of dependencies and less into independency, less into autonomy, and more into how every concept is a social construct of also chains of dependency. So these were two references for me which were very important, and I'm going to get into that as I talk more about how I've been rebuilding Casa do Povo as a critical institution. What does that mean? So I'm going to really like try to get into that through this short, I hope, presentation. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is to talk a bit about the history of Casa do Povo. I want to talk about this people's house, which I found with almost no people. So what was it to find this house without a people? This kind of almost empty place, right? And so that's the place in 1946, and then in the late 40s when it was being built. Basically, it was built by leftist, communist, anti-fascist Jewish migrants who came from Eastern Europe and settled down in Bom Retiro in São Paulo, and they wanted to build an anti-fascist organization in Brazil. And here there's a Yiddish plate where it says that the place was built in memory to those who died in the Nazi genocide. So it's written Gedenk in Yiddish, Gedenk Majdanek, Gedenk Auschwitz. And so the place was built in homage to those who died, but the idea was that the best way to remember the dead is to take care of the living. So the place opened up in 53 with all this crowd on the second floor of the building where I'm in right now. I'm on the first floor. But when I found the place in 2012, it was empty. That's the same space, right? You can, the arch in the back, you can see it, right? I don't know if I'm somewhere here, but if you can see it. That's the same art that you can see there. So I found the place kind of empty because Casa do Povo, the People's House, had been very important in the 60s and 70s to fight dictatorship. It has been very important for leftist, communist, anarchist, anti-fascist, Jewish movement. But in the 80s and 90s, Casa do Povo lost the enemy, dictatorship, and also it lost its connection with the Communist Party, which it was very strongly connected with, and also with the drift of Israel into fascism. This leftist Jewish association became a bit anachronical, even outlandish, I would say. But nevertheless, it was still there. It never shut down, and that was very exciting. And for me as a curator, I mean, this symposium is called the Speculative Pen, and I understand that the idea around this notion is to look either at the pen for a way to kind of radicalize our imagination, but also to look at concrete structures we can build. And for me, as a curator, maybe because of lack of imagination, I need something to work with. And for me, it was very exciting to have like this 4,000 square meters and this long history to be able to work with. And when I came in 2012, 2013, the place was almost shutting down, but it was still open. But it was shutting down also because of security reasons. So I took this newspaper, which was the mouthpiece of Casa do Povo, called Unsere Stimme in Yiddish, our voice in English, Nossa Voz in Portuguese. And I said, let's relaunch it because it had been shut down by dictatorship in 1964. So how to relaunch a newspaper for a derelict space? That was a challenge, like 50 years after it had been shut down. And I want to bring this example because for me, it's a good example of what art can do to institutions. Before looking at what institutions can do to art, I wanted to look at what art can do to institutions. Because to relaunch the newspaper, I had to invent the content, what to talk about. And I had to invent at the same time the readers, who's going to read this newspaper. And that's why I call this first part of my presentation the house, the hammer, and the nail. Because I felt that when I found Casa do Povo like this, it was like finding a hammer on a table. But I had somehow to deduce the nail, what to use the hammer for, and to induce the user who's going to use the hammer. I don't know if that's clear, but it was like a tool which needed somehow to reconnect with its function. And the newspaper was a good way to test that. So I created the news, basically, inviting artists to the performance in Casa do Povo, and people participating in the performances then wanted to read about it. And the newspaper was a way to publish something about the performance that had taken place in Casa do Povo. So it was interesting that to use the place, this kind of empty shell, but full of history, with artists performing in the space, and through this performance, commenting on it, producing a newspaper based on an old version that people could access. And so suddenly we could create at the same time the nail and the user, the news and the reader. So it was a way to rebuild the people of the house through actions, and to reconnect the past memory through contemporary times. And you have to imagine that in 2013 in Brazil, we had huge demonstrations taking place. And Casa do Povo was very anachronical by then. Because as I said, it connected to kind of lost world, like anti-fascist Judaism, downtown São Paulo, struggle against dictatorship. Dictatorship ends in Brazil in 85. So in the 90s and 2000, it felt anachronical. But with the big demonstration in 2013, the place felt contemporary again. And it laid as a tool to be used. And I like these pictures because it shows like after several performances, somehow we could reconnect with a group of people that felt that Casa do Povo was their own. So I like to echo this image with the first one I showed you in 53, where people were inaugurating the space. So for me, it's how through art and performances, I was reconnected this old tool to the neighborhood. And it's today, what was a Jewish neighborhood became a Korean neighborhood, a Bolivian neighborhood. So we had to work with also this new population. They are the people of this house somehow, which brings me to the second part of this online presentation. And you're okay? Everyone is okay?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Which is this idea of the diasporic institution. I mean, of course, as you might have understood, Casa do Povo, as a Jewish institution, is very much defines itself very much as a diasporic institution. So our territory is much more a language, the Yiddish, rather than a land, Palestine or Israel. I mean, in that sense, Casa do Povo is obviously an institution that's not connected to a Zionist project. It defends the idea that we can exist without an army and without a nation state. But what I'm interested here is less about this Jewish construct, but how this can be useful to think institutions in general. Because to think about a diasporic institution, for me, brings a lot of questions to the table. So if our territory is a language, for instance, how do we work with our surroundings? But also, what are the people who should be able to use the place? And also, if we look at the identity politics today, which is obviously a big deal, how can the Jewish identity of the institution can be a starting point, and not a point, not a horizon, not a place we want to go to. I mean, I don't try to defend a Jewish identity. I use it as a starting point to always take the risk of getting lost in the other. And for me, in that sense, if Jews were one of the figures of otherness in Europe in past centuries, a Jewish institution in Brazil should be open to what we call radical alterity. So to otherness in general. So we work with racialized movements, people, with groups that are politically minorized, I don't know if you can say that in English, but who are treated as minorities. We work with LGBT movement, we work with migrants, because we are a Jewish institution, because we understand that we should unfold this identity by working with other groups who can be seen as radically different from where Casa do Povo comes from, but that's exactly where it connects. So that's for us really important to understand how we work this radical alterity through radical trust, through radical autonomy. And I'm going to get back into this in a more concrete way. The easiest way that Victoria even asked me to talk about is just giving out the key of the building. Because today Casa do Povo is this 4,000 square meter building. We do program the place. As artist director, I'm in charge of, let's say, 20% of what happens in Casa do Povo, but I always say that I'm less, let's say, programming the space. I don't, Casa do Povo is not a box that I should fill up with things. For me, it's more about looking at the space as a program. So it's less about programming a space and filling the box with exhibitions, objects, seasons, etc., but more about understanding how the space is the program. And for me, one very important thing when we think about the space as a program and less about programming the space is how do we decentralize decisions? So how do we transform Casa do Povo as a resource for other groups? Bamida is very familiar for a German context, looking at what also Juan Grupa did in Documenta 15. I worked with Juan Grupa in the São Paulo Biennial in 2014, and we had this common interest of becoming a resource for the others, decentralizing. Maybe I think the twist, maybe it's a question regarding Documenta, is how to decentralize without losing total control, maybe collective control of what's happening in the institution. But giving out the key for me is a way to decentralize and is a gesture of radical trust. To whom do we give the key? Today we're home to 20 collectives, 22 to be exact. 1/3 are artist collective, dance, performance, visual art, graphic design. 1/3 are more like neighborhood collective. Besides a Yiddish choir, we have also Korean choir, we have Bolivian seamstresses, etc. And 1/3 is more like activist collectives. People like a boxing academy, psychoanalysis clinic, and other movement discussing the commons, rise to the city, and other connected issues. So, and they have the key. And having the key, they participate in the management of the space. I will get back to that afterwards. But it's a very simple gesture that illustrates for me what a diasporic institution should be in how it relates to the space. So we eventually do not divide space. We divide time to share space. So the same space, the second floor, for instance, can host a seminar. And that's funny because the image on the top, left corner, the caption is wrong, is a bunch of hammock that Amilcar Packer hang in the space. That was in I'm sorry, I didn't put the dates. I think it was in 2017. And we were doing the same thing that you're doing now. We were doing a laboratory for flexible structures, and we were discussing art spaces, self-organization, and we invited people from different places, like from Puerto Rico, from Brazil, from France, and other places, but also from arts and other also fields like activist places from Italy, from Brazil. And we discussed for a while, hanging around, literally, what kind of structures we would like to work with. But the same place can be a place to rehearse, can be a place to train box, can be a place for Renata Lucas to show an artwork. So how we divide time to share space. And that's for me very important in the way we deal with the space. And then we can have these kind of strange connections, unexpected encounters between a painting by Fred Ravioli and Gabriel Usami and a Korean choir. And in the back, there's also a kitchen which was designed by a group of artists called Grupo Inteiro in São Paulo. So these strange encounters in the same space of a painting, of a choir, and of a kitchen. And these encounters for me are very important because they give other understanding of what art can and should be, and not separate from other spheres of life. And here it looks like more an exhibition space because you have this work by Carlos Fajardo in the middle. but in the back it's a work by Henri Sala, and on the right hand it's a work by Carla Zaccanini. So we had an exhibition, but the place was still used by other groups to rehearse and to meet with these obstacles in the middle. So we didn't reduce the place to an exhibition hall. And that's a picture of Mauro Restif hanging in the back of the piano where the Yiddish choir rehearses. So for me, these are like very simple and concrete example of how we become a resource for the others, how we work with radical trust, how we give the key to different groups, how we share the space instead of dividing it and transforming it into a co-working, how we guarantee that also arts and artworks can connect and live together with other practices, from boxing to choir singing and other kind of things. And that brings me to the third point, which I call like tactical dependencies, where I look at institutions, that construction sites. So places that are never ready somehow. And Casa do Povo looks a lot like a ruin because after 80 years and many turmoils in terms of finances and dictatorship and losing support because of political positions that we have, etc. Casa do Povo looks a lot like a ruin. But for me, the ruin is more like the possibility of a construction site. So the fragility interests me a lot, as long as it's not a precarity, it's not precarious. So how to look at fragility, but not as precarity. And for me, this goes a lot through the idea of tactical dependencies. We often talk about independent spaces. I kind of avoid this vocabulary. That brings me back to Howard Becker and Bruno Latour I was talking about in my introduction. I like to look at dependencies and who do we depend on and how do we depend on. And for me, that's what I look for when I talk about Casa do Povo as an institution. So, of course, we have this quite amazing space, which is really something very important for us. But I guess for a lot of Kunstverein, for instance, in Germany, I guess you also have your own space already. We don't pay rent, we own the building. But then what's interesting is what we can bring in the space. So it was during the pandemic, we didn't shut down. So we brought in soap and masks and gloves and books and food, but also who do we bring in? So people from the neighborhood, artists, architects to work together. So during the pandemic, we never shut down. We kept on functioning. And we tried to define new dependencies in terms of funding, communication, workers, people from the neighborhood. So for me, that was interesting. I like to bring this image because it's an artwork by Antonio Gias, which is called Do It Yourself, Freedom Territory. And it's also an invitation to look at space in a different way, but also to look at who do we depend on and how. Before I get into this horrible drawing, I would just like to stress the idea that in Casa do Povo, we really have a peculiar economical model in terms of tactical dependencies. We keep our budget as low as possible. We're talking about like something like 600,000 euros a year. I think that makes sense. A bit less, maybe. A bit less than 600,000 euros a year. That's our budget. And it's very much divided into many different lines. So we have 5% of it come from the members of the associations. We have 150 people who are members. Then 5% come from friends of the association. We have like 300 friends. That's 10%. Then something like 30% comes from foundations, national or international foundation. And we are shifting from art foundation to foundation that defends democracy, because we have had issues with collectors. I don't know how it is in Germany. I guess it's the same, but in Brazil we have this kind of situation where people love to buy indigenous art, but they don't want to recognize indigenous land. This kind of cognitive dissonance. So because of that and issues around indigenous land in Brazil, for instance, but also regarding political stands, regarding other situations, and also in the Middle East, we lost some support in the art world. So we went into more, let's say, another kind of philanthropy, more connected to the defense of democracy, anti-fascist organizations. So 30% comes from these kinds of foundations. Then we go for open calls, national or international. Then we also have every year a bit like Met Gala fundraiser, a big party. That's maybe 15%, 20% of our budget. And also we participate in some art fairs, selling some artworks, etc., in partnership with artists. And that's a bit more or less. Oh, and of course, there's tax incentive. People and companies can give us money and deduce from their tax. But what is important here is less the breakdown of the budget, but more the way it's diversified. And there's no convention with the state. We don't receive any fixed amount from the state, which is not something we asked for. It's a condition somehow in Brazil for places like ours. But what would be important for us, even if we were to depend on public funding, is not to depend too much on public funding, because it's very flickering. It can change based on elections. So that's why it's very important to have a very diverse budget. Friends, members, foundation, open calls, fundraisers, tax incentive, and so on. And this 600,000 is divided into all these things. But I cannot talk about the funding if I don't talk about governance. Can you see this horrible drawing? Yeah? Anyone?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So it's more simple than it seems, but it's a way to say that usually an association in Brazil, and I think all over the world, is based on a bunch of members that elects boards, fiscal, deliberative, and advisory board. So I'm not sure you can see my mouse here, but basically that's the deliberative board. That's the one on the top here, somewhere, that hires an executive direction that runs the show. What's interesting is we also have a bottom-up construction, which is what we call the people of the house, all these collectives that are in residence, in case that have the key to the place, all the community group that use the place, and they also have their own assembly, and they elect representatives that sit with the team in what we call Casa do Povo's commission. So Casa do Povo is not horizontal, it's bottom-up and top-down at the same time. So you have this board hiring the executive direction that programs the space, but you have also these collectives that are inhabiting the space, have the key to the space, that elect representatives that sit with the team to define how to use the space. And this comes with a lot of conflict, but it's a way to look at Casa do Povo as a contradiction in movement, and not as a horizontal or just vertical organization. And the most interesting things is that some members of the association are also part of the team and are also part of collective that uses the space. And this doesn't create a conflict of interest. It creates a common interest. Everyone talks about the commons all the time, but how do you concretely build that? And for us, it's through redundancy. It's through the same people having different roles in the organization, right? And that for me is very important, because then it means that we don't have a public, we have a community. We don't have rules, we have agreements. You can find this small diagram in this book. You can download it on our website called Casa do Povo, an institution in the making. And you can find many other things there. It's a beautiful book we launched last year. But I just wanted to drive your attention on the governance, not only the economics. And for me, that's how also we built these tactical dependencies I talk so much about. Which brings me to the last point. I kind of lost track of time, I'm sorry. Which is looking for minimum institutionality. And for me, that's very important, because I don't want to have to reinvent the wheel. Maybe because I was born in France, I kind of like institution. I can see the institution as something that allows us to do things, and not only as something that limits us or should freeze us in a way or another. So, but I'm also very adamant about how the institution can be a threat to a kind of desire for change and flexibility and for life in general. So I always look for the minimum institutionality. I want institution not to reinvent the wheel all the time, but as minimum as possible. This is not a slide that I took from my daughter. It's something that was supposed to be here, but it's a metaphor I use a lot when I want to talk about the threat of growing. I mean, we all grew up watching science fiction movies, right? And in science fiction movie, there's always these huge insects or like huge spiders or whatever with this exoskeleton invading and destroying cities. At one point in my life, I discovered that this is impossible because as insects grow, since they have an exoskeleton, they cannot grow enough muscle and flesh to move their exoskeleton. So if they were to be a giant ant in the landscape or a giant spider, it couldn't move. And for me, that's a good metaphor when we think about this kind of crazy movement that institutions are going through in the past 30 years, which is to grow endlessly, to buy the building next door, to open a new building, and et cetera, because at the end of the day, there's less place for flesh and only for the exoskeleton. So institutions tend to take care of themselves more than about their main objectives that they were built for in the origin. And instead of growing, my idea is how we can proliferate. And in that sense, Casa do Povo doesn't want to grow. It wants to proliferate. So we talk about how we work very openly, or our budget are very open. We have pedagogical programs to discuss about our functioning. To be here with you today, even though virtually, is a way to share tools and to spread. Everything is copyleft. The book we did, an institution in the making, talks about how we work. We're not a model, we're just one experience. I'm sure everyone here has much more exciting experience to share, but I'm sure we also have a lot in common. But for me, that's very important to look into this possibility of spreading instead of growing, and of looking at this minimum institution, because then it's also flexible to open to other practices. And I'm going to end with this project we did recently in 2023 with Celia Tupinamba, an indigenous artist. In Brazil, the question of relationship between contemporary art and indigenous art is very strong and complex, because museums are showing more and more indigenous artists, but often asking them to fit in what is a contemporary museum. And what we tried to do at Casa do Povo with Glyceria Tupinamba was the opposite, to see how we could adapt the museum to what she was looking for. And she made this clock that you can see, this mantle, which is in our Yiddish library. And there was a beautiful way to connect the Yiddish library, I mean, what is left over of the Yiddish land of the genocide, with Celia Tupinamba as an artist with her community, trying to recreate her traditional clock from her people and to show it there. But what is interesting, we didn't show it there. Most of the time it was empty. It wasn't there because the clock was moving around the city, visiting indigenous villages in São Paulo, museums, squat, and everywhere it would be received, and they would host a talk or something. And the clock, by moving around the city, gained more and more agency. And for me, that's a way to kind of think about how this flexible museum, this minimum institution, can be adapted with practices which has nothing to do with the origin of the building, with the origin of the institution, with the origin of the model we're working with. So how this Casa do Povo, Jewish, Western, Eastern Europe institution can suddenly be useful, be a tool, be a hammer in the hand of the Tupinamba nation, not only to show what they're developing as a work, but to help them to recognize their land, which was recognized eventually a year after the exhibition, 2 years ago. So how we connect to the local struggle through arts without separating it from other spheres of life and adapting this institution to other practices. And that's another project where we teach Guarani, which is also another nation in Brazil. We teach Yiddish, but we also teach Guarani language in Casa do Povo. Anyway, I could go on for hours, and I said I wouldn't talk too much, and I did talk too much, and I'm very sorry for that. But that's somehow where I wanted to take you. And I have many also doubts about how useful this is, if this experience makes sense in other contexts, if people have time for the kind of understanding of the arts we are interested in, or if in this ever accelerating society, non-growing institution are anachronical. But that's a bit what we've been doing in the past 15 years in just 45 minutes. Sorry, Victoria. I hope you're still all alive and listening in a way or another. It's horrible to be online, believe me. But it's horrible to be sitting there.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. It's such a pleasure that you shared the insights of your practice, thinking, mindset, and how you do it in practice, and also being so transparent about the origins of how the space is financed, and also about the part with the governance. This is so important because it actually is so connected to what happens in the program and what is possible and who has agencies and how you can share. It's also nice that you showed the project with Glyceria Tupinamba, because it was also what I saw when I visited. I saw it when it wasn't there, as you just described. So I will ask the others if they have questions or comments. Can you hear us? Yeah? Good.
I'm not checking the people in the room, but I could hear you but let's. If you want to come close by also, it's okay. I will not bite. I'm just computer.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. It was very impressive, and it totally, resonated with us. And we even talked about tools here and speculative broad fork and so on. And about the democratization of the program. I have a question. You don't have to answer this question, but you said that you are leaving. Do you already know what will happen afterwards? Because I wonder. What is then your trajectory, if you want to share?
Okay. Any other question? We can go for a round, maybe, if there's anyone who wants to ask anything about all the thing I throw at you. Take your time. I
think for now that's the only question, but maybe there will be more. There is one.
Woohoo! See, nothing like silence.
I was really curious about the indigenous art connection that you were building, and the question is there anything that sticks out as like a learning, something new that you've learned, or something new that you might change as a result of working with indigenous artists and curation around them?
Cool. Anywhere else? Okay, I can try. So yeah, but first thing, I think I'm stepping down, but I don't know what I'm going to do afterwards, and that's exciting somehow. But the idea is that I'm going to still be connected, especially to the political issues around Casa do Povo. Because in the past 2 years, we lost almost half our budget, but now we just managed to get it back. and it's also connected to very much issues which are more like political. I miss just being a curator, to be honest. But in the past 2 years, we've been like very much active in political questions, working with the left, looking at anti-Semitism and its instrumentalization, weaponization by the far right. So we've been like working a lot around these issues. So I'm going to still like collaborate on Casa do Povo, maybe part-time on these issues. But then I felt that for all I've told you to make sense, I need to leave. Because I never planned to do an organization that was only adapted to my own body, I would say. So the objective was always to build a structure. My work as a curator is always to listen to space, to what they have to say. I'm not very imaginative in that sense. I need really something to work with, and listening to spaces, listening to room, listening to all what is somehow embedded in the architecture and in the history, which is embedded in the architecture, that I start to develop something. And I've been doing that in other projects. Not only the São Paulo Biennial, which was like a big project, but like smaller project, like Vila Itororó here in São Paulo, which was a huge ruin. And I had to build an art space in the middle of the construction, renovation site of this ruin. So I'm very really connected as a curator to build structures, infrastructures, as I listen to the space and work with artists on that. And somehow for me, all that I'm saying would make sense if the infrastructure that I built doesn't depend so much on only one person. So, and now there's 15 people working. I divide direction with Marcela, who's operation directions. There's other curators working with me. 70% of the program is done by the groups inhabiting the space. So leaving shouldn't even be perceived in a way, right? Because the place speaks for itself somehow. When I entered Casa do Povo in 2011, the first time, I felt it was an opportunity for a then young curator. But I realized that I was an opportunity for the building, and I was devoured by the building somehow. So I need to escape also, I feel. So that's why I'm kind of stepping down, and let's see what's going to come. And we're going to open a call if anyone wants to apply, be my guest, to move to Brazil. It's a beautiful city. It's the middle of winter and it's still warm, but not too hot. So that's going to be launched, I guess, in end of August. And the other question regarding indigenous art for me is very important, very interesting. But I would like to say one thing which connects the first point to the second point, which is the fact that I'm stepping down after almost 15 years working, which I think is kind of a lot, but it's okay, not too much. I talked a lot in the past years with a curator from South Korea called Bina Choi about this kind of decisions, because she left Casco, where she was working, and she was like, we don't need to step down, we should like just stay in places forever. It's okay. That's kind of neoliberal idea that we need to move away from places we work. But I agree partly in the sense that something I strongly defend in Casa do Povo is to work with the same artist in the past 15 years. I really go against this kind of will of art spaces to innovate because if you want to innovate every year, it means that you're also things can be thrown away, right? So if you work with an artist one time, you will not work with the same artist another time. So I like to repeat relationships. To iteration for me is very important. Repetition. I see my work as a general rehearsal. I'm rehearsing every year the same play. And the beauty of it is moving things around. It's kind of a choreography of daily life. And that's how I see my work also as a curator. And in that sense, I think then I should step down, because after 15 years of working with the same artist, I think it's good for the institution, for the artist, for the art scene to change in that sense. But it's not a discourse based on innovation. It's a discourse based on just updating some stuff, moving on, changing things, but in a low pace. And that's for me very important. And in that sense, working with indigenous groups and movements is very interesting, because it helps us to look at also what we are in different way. It's in Brazil, we talk a lot about ancestrality. I don't know if this discourse is also very present in Europe. When we talk about indigenous movement, it's a word that comes a lot, ancestrality. And it's interesting to see that Casa do Povo has its own ancestrality as well. And then how do we connect these kind of different ancestralities together through solidarity, which is a term that is used in the symposium, I guess, and I use it also a lot here. I like to use solidarity less as a noun and more as a verb. What does it mean to be in solidarity? And I like to use the notion of solidarity in the place of empathy. I think empathy is very interesting, it's very important, of course, but it's something that's a more like personal kind of feeling. There's something even bourgeois in that sense. It's something that you can feel inside yourself, whereas solidarity is something that you have to build with others. And a British writer called Gary Young called my attention on that. He gave a lecture at Casa do Povo and talked really about how solidarity should be a verb. And in that sense, when we work with indigenous nations, we work with this kind of radical alterity in terms of language, in terms of ancestrality, in terms of relationship to cosmovision, but we are in solidarity. And so we need to adapt the pace, the way we work, the way we deal with the space, with finance. And now we're going to show, for instance, in the end of August, a beautiful work we're working with the Mashakali Nation. And because the Mashakali Nation, it's a nation in Minas Gerais state, and they lost their land, and they lost their the flora and the fauna, because they have no forest anymore, but they still can sing their land. They have a song for each animal they've lost. They have a song for 18 different kinds of bees. And even if they have never seen that bees, they can recognize them if they go in a museum to see dead bees, you know? And their idea is through their art, they want to recreate the forest, and they're buying land. And we're gonna help them to sell works, to buy land, to talk about the bees that they're singing through painting and sound archive, to be able to retake the forest and retake the land. So it's very concrete at the end of the day. It's not that theoretical, or at least it's theoretical, but in a very concrete way. So I try to answer with other examples of other nations we've been working with. But that's what we've been learning in that sense. That it's less about this binary thing, indigenous world and contemporary world, but how we can connect things. And when I was with Celia Tupinamba in Sweden last year, Maria Lind invited us to show in Kiruna, in the north of Sweden, the exhibition we did with Glyceria. And Glyceria was talking with other indigenous artists from New Zealand and from the Sami people. And she was saying something very interesting. We don't want our things back. You can keep them, but you should take good care of them. But you should let us have access to it, and we're just going to produce new ones. And for Celia Tupinamba to have artifacts from her nations in European museums is a way to occupy Europe. So we understand, you kind of shift in all the way you look at art, at what means occupying, what means solidarity, what means connecting art to other kind of cultural practices. And that challenges also what we are in terms of modernity and what museums and art spaces we want. So yeah, I think it's really amazing to be able to connect and still in such homogenized world to be able to find still a radical alterity and work together in solidarity.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. Very, very strong, very, 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 very valuable. Also with this information that you are leaving Casa do Povo. Thank you so much. And I even forgot what I wanted to say. there was one more thought. I think it's also so nice to hear what you said about diasporic institution, what it all could mean, because there is so much work to do also to see how post-migrational and colonial continuities are connected to each other and how they can learn from each other and how you can grasp competencies and how everything how to bring things into agency.
Yeah. Cool. Well,
thank you so much.
To be well with you. It's already late for you. You should get some rest. Good Shabbos, as we say here. And if you want my contact, Victor, feel free to share email, WhatsApp. As you know, I'm very good at email. You can share my WhatsApp also. If anyone comes to Brazil at one point to visit, please WhatsApp me. I'm in São Paulo. It's going to be a pleasure to receive you. And next year, from January to June, I'll be in Europe for 6 months sabbatical. So in Paris, I think. So anyway, please reach out.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we will echo also a little bit.
Bye.